So we're using this booklet. We're going to cover one more thing of reference to Rosh Hashana. And we're going to go to page 12 again. We went to this page a few times, but now we're going there again for another reason. Okay, so the source in Torah that Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment. Remember, we said in the Chumash, it mentions nothing about judgment. It just says that it's a day which is a yontif. You blow the shofar, you bring certain sacrifices, but not a word mentioned about judgment. And we said there are two sources that's the day of judgment. One is here in the booklet on 11a, and one is on page 12. One is in Chumash, Pashas Eikev, where it says Hashem has his eyes on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. The Gemara says, this teaches us that Hashem, in the beginning of the year, makes his judgment of everything that's going to happen all the way till the last day of the year. The other pasuk is on page 12, and that's a pasuk in Tehillim, Pei Aleph, and what it says there is these words: Tiku b'chodesh shofar, blow the shofar on b'chodesh means at the new moon, b'kesel yom chagenu, which means it's a holiday that the moon is concealed. So the Gemara says, which holiday is the moon concealed? There's no holiday the moon is concealed except for Rosh Hashana. So we know from this that the pasuk is talking about Rosh Hashana. Right after that, it says, Ki chayk l'Yisrael hu mishpat v'lekei Yaakov. It's a day of judgment. So that's how we know that in Rosh Hashanah we're being judged. This is the source. So what is the judgment about? About everything. Whether a person should have sustenance, whether a person should be healthy, whether a person should have a home to live in, whether they'll be able to buy the clothing that they need, to get married, having children, and all the things that go on throughout life every day is judged by Hashem. But it's explained in Chassidus is also another thing. In fact, by Chassidim, that's what they focus on more than anything else, and that is that not only are we being judged regarding our gashmias, we're also being judged regarding our ruchnius. In other words, let's look at the words again. So, based on the fact, I wonder if they bring it here in their commentary. No. But based on other places in Torah, the word chayk means laws or statutes. But in other places, the word chayk also means food. So it goes like this: Ki chayk l'Yisrael hu mishpat v'lekei Yaakov. It's a day that we judge regarding our food and sustenance, and it's a judgment for the God of Yaakov. The simple meaning is the God of Yaakov, which is Hashem, is judging us. The deeper meaning is it's a judgment of how much of the God of Yaakov I will be able to experience throughout the year. So we need to explain what this means. First of all, we need to explain it because, so turn back to page 10. One of the very famous quotes in Gemara is, Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mi yirei shamayim. Sisters?
Yeah.
Welcome. Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mi yirei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven, which means we have choices how to do the right thing or the wrong thing. So when we say everything's hashgacha pratis, and Hashem made me lose a job, get the job, miss the car ride, get the car ride, be able to buy this out, all these gashmizic things is Hashem running it. But what about the choice whether I should do something which is according to Torah or violate Torah? That's my choice. That's not Hashem making me do it or arranging it. I make the choices. Anything that relates to Yireh Shamayim, which means anything that's related to spirituality, serving Hashem, that's what we know as Bechira. So then the question is, if Bechira is something which is in my hands, how can we say Mishpat L'Lekei Yaakov? It's a judgment by the God of Israel, which in this context means that Hashem is judging how much ruchnis we'll have, where if everything is in my hands. What I mean, what kind of judgment could it be? That would almost imply, or that would imply, that Hashem is the one who rules and sort of judges me in the beginning of the year whether I'll do the right thing or the wrong thing. But that's not the way it is. In fact, right in the beginning of Tanya, this is one of the first things you learn about in Tanya, where it says, Hashem, you created tzaddikim and you created rishayim. Now the Rebbe says, wait a second, the Gemara says, Hashem does not pronounce whether the person will be a tzaddik or a rasha. He says whether they'll be wealthy or not wealthy, whether they'll be strong or he'll be weak, whether he'll do this or that, but he does not say what he'll be spiritually, because that depends on our free choice. According to this, every Rosh Hashana, Hashem judges me how I'll be spiritually. So it can be. On the other hand, let's look a little bit at a few places in davening, even though there's more. On page 11, no. Page 12, no. Sorry, page 13. No, I wanted to show you page 14, sorry. Page 14. In davening, before the Shema, look at the words that we say. Avinu of Rachman. Our Father was the Father of great mercy. Rachem aleinu, have mercy on me. The same b'libeinu, and please put into my heart lahabin or lahaskil, to learn, to understand, to learn myself, to teach others, lishmer v'lases, to observe, and all the things in the Torah with love. And Hashem, enlighten my eyes in Torah study. I should be attached to observance of mitzvahs. Unite my heart to love and fear you. So we are asking for ruchnis. Turn the page is another place in davening, in the part which is Volet Zion. Maybe not everybody says that part. But here again, we're asking Hashem, Hu yiftach libeinei b'sirasei. Hashem, may you open our hearts to your Torah, instill within our hearts love and awe for him, to do his will and serve him wholeheartedly. But that's our choice. Hashem doesn't do that. So the answer is there's two inyanim, and specifically in learning Chassidus, we understand what the second inyan is all about. And that is, yes, this is free choice, whether I'm going to eat matzah on Pesach or not, whether I'm going to violate Shabbos or not, whether I'm going to set aside learning for Torah or not, whether I give tzedakah or not, all these choices, which are practically whether I'm going to follow Torah or do something which is not according to Torah, that's my choice that I have to make. And I have my Yitzhak Tov, Yitzhak Hara fighting with me, and I have to do the right thing. And that's up to me. Hashem says that's you have to make that choice. So as we explained, and as anyone who's in Chassidus level 2 knows well, that learning Torah properly, I mean, this is what we explained why we go to the Beis Hamikdash, is not just to do the practical part, to read the word of Torah, to understand the words of Torah, even be passionate about Torah in itself, because it's so brilliant and so deep. But the main thing is to be passionate about the godliness in Torah. That when I'm learning Torah, I'm learning it, and what's the driving force? I'm being driven by the desire to connect to Hashem, to embrace Hashem. And I understand that when I study Torah, I am embracing Hashem through Torah. I'm embracing Hashem through mitzvahs. So the neshama of Torah and mitzvahs is the godliness in Torah, the godliness in mitzvah. And that's really what it's all about. And when we spoke about in the Maimer, about mitzvahs and averos, also the same thing. It's not about punishment, but the excitement to do a mitzvah is because through that I become connected to Hashem. I'm drawing down godliness into this world. And when I go against it, I am causing some sort of defect spiritually in my neshama. It creates a block between me and Hashem. So the central theme behind everything in Torah and mitzvahs is me being connected to Hashem on a deeper, more emotional level, right? So now, this is what I'm asking for. This is what I'm davening for. A person could be doing a mitzvah, and I could do the mitzvah in a very technical way, dry way, just do the body of the mitzvah. Or I could merit that when I do the mitzvah, I'll feel the godliness in the mitzvah. I'll feel that godly connection. That is Hashem's bracha. And for that, we need to daven and ask Hashem. We should merit. I should feel the godliness in Torah, the godliness in mitzvah. In other words, people know for themselves. I went to a Shabbos table. I went to a Torah class. I was involved in some sort of observance of mitzvahs, and I get very excited. And of course, we know very often two people come together to the same Chabad house, they're sitting by the same rabbi, the same rebbetzin, eating the same delicious fish and chava. And one of them is all inspired, and the other one says, well, I'm not coming here, man. It's boring. What's the difference? And sometimes it's two people from the same family. They have the same upbringing, the same teacher, the same values, and yet one is interested, the other one, it totally doesn't touch them. And the answer is, obviously, this person, it's not what they did the same thing. They heard the same thing. They were involved in the same thing. But the difference is, this person on Shabbos somehow felt the godliness in Shabbos, and this person didn't. What's the difference? Why that? We don't know. It could very well be that it's a result of something that the person did. In other words, even people, but before they're frum, without realizing it, they're doing a lot of things which are very pleasant to Hashem. Like they can help somebody, that's a mitzvah. They don't call it mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah. Honoring parents is a mitzvah. There's so many things that we do, which even if we're not doing it formally as a mitzvah, but it's still good deeds, and in Hashem's way, this is a positive thing, and we don't even know how valuable it is. You don't even know how precious it is to Hashem. So it's very possible that this person did something once before. And in that merit, now when they come to Shabbos or something else, Hashem allows them to feel the godliness in Shabbos, the godliness in Beis HaMikdash. People go to Eretz Yisrael, they go to the Kotel. Some people get excited and inspired, and some people just write down on a piece of paper. It was nice in my diary, it was by the wall, very nice. And that's about as far as it goes. What's the difference? This person merited that they felt whatever goes on in their head, that's so it should make sense psychologically and make sense according to nature. But the real reason is that neshama was stirred up and they felt it. And that is the schus of Hashem. And that's what we're talking about. So basically, this is what it means. We're judged about Gashmias, and we ask Hashem to give us that, and we're judged about Ruchnias. So the second line on this page, page 10, it says, Hashem should bless you in everything that you do. So the Medrash says, I would think, based on that I don't have to go out to go work because Hashem will bless me. If I have His blessing, I don't have to go to work. If I don't have His blessing, going to work won't help me. So why bother? Just daven, say Tehillim. If you still don't have any money, give another few coins for tzedakah. Say another capital Tehillim. No, that's why the pasuk adds one word, ashetasa, 2 words. Hashem will bless you in everything that you will do, which means I have to do certain things. That makes the keli, and then Hashem will give His bracha through that keli. So just like it applies to Gashmias, it also applies to Ruchnias, which means I'll learn, I'll do the mitzvah. I'm making an effort to try to feel the godliness in the mitzvah by learning about it, understanding it more, trying to be more in tune. And if I make that keli, then Hashem will give me the bracha. But ultimately, I do need Hashem's bracha, that I should feel the godliness in my Torah, in my mitzvahs, in my everything that I do in Yiddishkeit. Recently, someone, a shliach in Ithaca, New York, so he wrote about his experience where he was in a yeshiva many years ago, and there was an older chassid there that was a chassid yet from the times of the Rebbe Rashab. Someone who used to daven for many hours, and he said to him, "Could you do me a favor, sit next to me by davening, because it's hard for me to get up and hard for me to sit down. It will help me." Fine. In the meantime, he had the opportunity to hear him davening. So he said during davening, he was crying a lot, sobbing at certain parts of davening. You never hear this. People daven, they say the words, and here he saw life to it. But he said, I observed something amazing. When it came to the parts of davening, like who will live, or God forbid, who will not, would it happen to them through fire, through water, or the pasuk where it says, man comes from dust and will return to dust. All these pieces, he said the words. When it comes to places like Hashem, your glory and your kingdom and your sovereignty should be in the whole world, he started sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. When he came to the part called Maminim, which talks about how amazing Hashem is, and it's a whole long list according to the Alabay about the greatness of Hashem, there he was sobbing. What are you sobbing about? Because it's a different kind of approach on that. And he was focusing on the greatness of Hashem and the desire to want to feel it and to want to be connected to it. And these were the things that were on his mind. Yes, he also asked for Hashem to give me health and long life and so on. But that was the focus. They actually tell a story that there was once a Rav. And I heard from someone who said he knows the details. It's actually a real story that there was a man who davened Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, and he was older, he got sick, and passed away. They needed to get a new chazan. So they asked a few people to sort of, they should offer their candidacy if they want to be a chazan or not. And everyone wanted to have that position. One particular chazan davened beautiful, and he really felt that he should get the position. So he actually davened and showed them how he davens, but the Rav didn't want to accept him. So the story I'm telling you fits into the story that this person said. So he asked the Rav, he says, why don't you want to accept me as a chazan? I daven just as good as the one who used to daven here for years. I know why you like that chazan, because you said cry a lot in davening. You'll hear me on Rosh Hashana, you'll hear me crying a lot in davening too. I get emotional. He said, yeah, but the difference is, and that's what he told him, you get emotional when you say man comes from dust and returns to dust. He gets emotional when he says, Hashem, you're the first in creation, you're the last in creation. That's the difference between what you're focusing on. So this explains the story. Usually by this time, everybody heard the story almost from every teacher. But I'm going to say it, and you'll tell me if you heard it or not, but the famous story with the chassid, his name was Shmuel Munkus. Somebody wrote a whole book about him. On one hand, he was a very big chassid. On the other hand, he would hide his greatness by doing all sorts of interesting stunts and things. If you ever heard the story, he was the one that he was walking with a group of friends, and then he jumped up, he passed the Alter Rebbe's house, he jumped up to the windowsill, was hanging from the windowsill, the chassid. So his friend said to him, what in the world are you doing? So he said, in those days, I guess, if you walk by a shoe store, there were shoes hanging. You walk by a clothing store, there's clothing hanging. So he walked by the Alter Rebbe's house, his business, he makes chassidim, you have to have a chassid hanging. This is the type of things he did. So one time he was traveling to the Alter Rebbe. In those days, it took quite a few days to get to your destination. So on the way, he had to stop off for Shabbos, stopped off at an inn of an older couple, a farmer and his wife. And it was, after Shabbos was over, it was a Shabbat before Rosh Hashana. He's in his room, and 1 o'clock in the morning, they're knocking on the door, said, Rabbi Yid, we're going to shul for slichas. So they said, he pretended to know. They're talking about, why are you waking me up in the middle of the night? So we're going to shul for slichas. He says, what's slichas? So you don't know what slichas? A Yid with a white beard, you don't know what slichas is? So they say to him, we asked Hashem for the new year, the cow should give good milk, and the field should give good crop, and we should have a lot of sustenance, we should be able to earn a living and have all the food we need. And he says to them, older people like you get up in the middle of the night to ask for food? That's what little babies do. Adults getting up in the middle of the night to ask for food? They had no idea what in the world he's talking about. This is the normal thing to do. You wake up at night and you say slichas. What he went to say was, that's what's primarily on your mind, that the cow should give good milk and that the field should give good crop. Of course, we need the gashmis, but the primary focus of it is the ruchnis. Plus, we know that the gashmis is a result of the ruchnis. If the ruchnis is in place, the bracha for gashmis will come. But the next little bit of time that we have left, I want to speak about Chof Tes Elul. Chof Tes Elul is the last day in Elul, and that's going to be Monday. And it's a very big day in the Hasidic calendar. Anyone know what it is? No? Now you'll know.
Fast day?
What?
The fast day?
No, the fast day is the one right after Rosh Hashana. and there's the one right before Rosh Hashana. Chavetz Elul is the birthday of the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek is the third Rebbe of Chabad. And of course, like any Rebbe, there's so much to talk about, but I'll just mention a few things. One of them is that, so how did he become the third Rebbe? His mother was a daughter of the Alter Rebbe. His mother's name was Dvorah Leah. He was born right before Rosh Hashana. That night, it was Rosh Hashana, the Alter Rebbe said a mimer. And the mimer began with Tanya, B'Soy, Peregi, with the Nida, Mashbina, Tzadik, Valti, Rosha, which means he said the first 3 chapters, which we know today as Tanya. That's what he said that night when he was born. And then throughout the next weeks, he continued, which basically means the Tanya, which Alter Rebbe wrote that night, is what he began to say it verbally. And then later he put it down in writing, and then it became the Sefer Tanya that we have. It was all connected to the birth of the Tzemach Tzedek. And this is a story in itself, which needs a lot of time, but just briefly, the Rebbe Dvorah Leah, his mother, which is the Alter Rebbe's daughter, in a sense, it's known that Hasidim sort of owe her everything that we have, because when the Tzemach Tzedek was I guess 2-3 years old, she was talking to her father, and as you know, in those days there was tremendous opposition against Hasidus. But the opposition wasn't just down here because there were people who misunderstood and therefore they were trying to fight it. But the opposition was really in Shemaim, in heaven, that there were forces in heaven that were arguing that the world is still not ready for these deep secrets of Torah to be revealed. And therefore, it's prohibited to be revealed. And the Alter Rebbe was fighting those forces up there, just like he was fighting with the people down here. In fact, that was the main reason why there was opposition down here, was because there was opposition up there. And then the Alter Rebbe shared with his daughter that he understood that because of the fact that he's not stopping, he's not giving up, and he's fighting it, he probably won't live to the end of this year, the new coming year. So when she heard about it, she decided, again, I can't explain why it had to be this way because we don't understand these things, but she decided that she's going to replace the Alter Rebbe. How did she do that? She needed to do it with the Bezdin of Rabbanim, rabbis, that they would rule that she could take the place of the Alter Rebbe. But no Rabbi is going to agree. So she came to a few of the greatest Chassidim of that time, and she said to them, I need to form a Bezdin, and I need for you to do something, but I can't tell you now what it is. I need a commitment from you, a promise, or maybe even an oath, that what I'm going to ask you, you're going to do. They were very, very confused. They were frightened. They knew that there's something going on. The Alter Rebbe had fainted a few months earlier because of everything that was happening, the opposition. They didn't know what's going on. But on the other hand, they knew that she was a big tzaddikus. And she's making such a request. There's definitely meaning and purpose to it. But they still felt a little bit uncomfortable to make a commitment and take an oath. No matter what she asks, they're going to do. Who knows what she's going to ask us to do? So they were deliberating for days, and then finally they decided they're going to do it. It was the day before Rosh Hashana, and then she told them what she heard from the Alter Rebbe. She said that she wants them to rule that she can take the place of the Alter Rebbe, so the Alter Rebbe can continue to live and spread Chassidus. That was the day before Rosh Hashana. The day after Rosh Hashana, on Rosh Hashana she got sick, and the day after Rosh Hashana, which means 3 days later, she passed away. And Alter Rebbe, from that point on, promised her that he's going to raise the Tzemach Tzedek. Her child was like 3 years old, and he grew up without a mother because of this. But on the other hand, it means she had literally Mesiras Nefesh. She understood that for whatever reason, we don't understand that apparently the Alter Rebbe's life needed to be taken away so that his work would continue. And she said that she would go instead of the Alter Rebbe. So that's Rebbe Dvorah Leah. And because of that, the Alter Rebbe always raised him, kept him next to him, And even though he was a grandchild, not a child, he was raised like the Alter Rebbe's child, and maybe even more than the children, because the Alter Rebbe had a very, he said, he promised her that he would take care of her. So one of the stories about the Tzemach Tzedek was that when the time came for him to be chosen as a Rebbe, it wasn't so simple. First, the Alter Rebbe passed, and the Mitzvah Rebbe became the next Rebbe. When the Mitzvah Rebbe passed, there were three people that were really capable of taking over leadership. One was the Tzemach Tzedek, because he was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, and also he was the son-in-law of the second Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe married his first cousin. Not to get you too confused. The Alter Rebbe had a son who was the Mitzvah Rebbe, right? And the Mitzvah Rebbe's daughter, her name was Chaim Mushka. So the Mitzvah Rebbe's daughter and Tzemach Tzedek were first cousins, because his mother and the Mitzvah Rebbe were brother and sisters, and that's who he married. So he was the son-in-law of the Rebbe that just passed. He was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, so that was one candidate. The Mitzvah Rebbe had a son, that was another candidate. The Alter Rebbe still had a brother that was alive, that was a third candidate. The only problem was, whoever they went to sent them to the other candidate. Nobody wanted to accept. So the Alter Rebbe's brother said, go to my nephew, and the nephew said, go to my brother-in-law. It's going back and forth for a few months. And then eventually there was a group of Rabbonim that approached the Tzemach Tzedek, and they said something to him that based on that, the Tzemach Tzedek finally agreed and accepted. The first mimer that he said began with the words, Al Shloisha Dvarim Ha'olam Oimei, the world stands on three things. He started the mimer, and then he paused, and he said, don't accuse me of something that's not me. I have no choice. My grandfather told me to do this. Everybody's looking around. Who is he talking to? Nobody knew who he is talking to. What is he talking about? Then he went on with the mimer. A few days later, there was an older chassid. He was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the Mitzvah Rebbe, and now the Tzemach Tzedek. His name was Rabbi Isaac Hamner. And he told the chassidim that Tzemach Tzedek was talking to me. And I'll tell you what's behind those words. He said one time the Alter Rebbe said a mimer, and it was very deep and very difficult, and nobody really grasped it. So he asked the Alter Rebbe, would you repeat the mimer again? In other words, not all the chassidim, but a small group of chassidim will go into the Alter Rebbe's room privately. They'll repeat the mimer, so now they'll get it and give it over to everybody else. The Alter Rebbe agreed. And he said, tomorrow after davening, come into my room. So they were waiting outside the Alter Rebbe's room, and they wanted to know where he's holding with his davening. So he said there were cracks in the wall, so they were looking through the cracks, and they couldn't see the Alter Rebbe, but they saw the little Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek used to copy the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe was davening, he also davened. Actually, he put on tefillin. He took potatoes, put one potato here, one potato on his head, put strings in the potatoes, tied it around, and those were his tefillin. When the Alter Rebbe was davening, he was also shaking and davening. Then they saw the little Tzemach Tzedek taking off the potatoes. So they understood the Alter Rebbe must be taking off his tefillin and finishing davening. So they got ready to go in. And the Alter Rebbe actually opened the door, told them to come in. One walked in, another one walked in. And he, at that point in time, was the youngest of the crowd. And as he started walking, he froze of such awe of walking in the Alter Rebbe's room. He froze and he just got stuck by the door. Alter Rebbe says, who's standing there? So someone answered in Yiddish, a younger man, a young man. The Alter Rebbe said, no, a younger man will become an older man. He should come in. And then he defrosted and he walked in. He walked in and he sees that the Tzemach Tzedek is, I think, trying to untangle the string that tangled up by the chair or by the table where he was standing. And he was afraid that that would disturb his concentration. So he was about to bend down and tell the Tzemach Tzedek, please, could you play a little bit down there, a little bit, not next to me. But as he's about to bend down, the Alter Rebbe stops in the middle of him speaking and says, leave him, he's listening. And there'll come a time that you'll know that he's listening. The mimer the Alter Rebbe said began with the words, the world stands on three things. Okay, some 30 years later, Tzemach Tzedek becomes a new Rebbe, starts saying the Maimer, and he hears that this is going in the same direction like the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. And he says to himself, wow, the Alter Rebbe said this Maimer then when he was like 2 years old or 3 years old. And now he's repeating it. He's really showing that he is worthy to be the Rebbe. And that's when he suddenly heard the Tzemach Tzedek saying, don't accuse me of doing something which is not me, like I'm trying to show something. I had no choice. My grandfather told me to say this Maimer. So if you think of the story, it's really incredible that he was bending down, and that's split second. Now the Rebbe saw the whole future, which means that the Mittel Rebbe will become the next Rebbe, that the Tzemach Tzedek will grow up to be the son-in-law of the Mittel Rebbe, that he's going to accept leadership, and the first Maimer is going to say is Ashleishet Dvarim Omeid, and therefore you're going to think that he doesn't hear. I'm letting you know that he's listening. And how long did all this take? In a split second. Okay, so he accepted leadership on Eresh. That was Shavuos time, by the way. That was Shavuos, but his birthday is on this day, and every year the Rebbe would have it for bringing the night before Rosh Hashana in honor of the Tzemach Tzedek's birthday. Obviously, whether it's connected to what his mother did or not, but the leadership of Chabad all now come from the Tzemach Tzedek. In other words, the Mittel Rebbe was the Alter Rebbe's son. Tzemach Tzedek was the son of the Alter Rebbe's daughter. But the next Rebbe was the Rebbe Marash, which is a granddaughter of Dvar Leah. And the next Rebbe was the Rebbe Rashab, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe, all descendants of the Tzemach Tzedek. It's like the leadership went through Tzemach Tzedek. Of course, people speculate that maybe that's in the schus of the fact that she had the Mesiras Nefesh, that her descendants all became the leaders of Chabad. But of course, these are things we don't understand. But I guess it can't hurt to speculate. One of the stories that the Rebbe tells about the Tzemach Tzedek sort of more often, and in fact, the Maimer, Basiligani, which is the first Maimer the Rebbe ever said, and therefore is one of the most significant Maimerim, in that Maimer, the Rebbe told the story of each one of the Rebbes of Chabad. And obviously there are hundreds of stories, so whatever story he chose must be a reason why specifically this story was chosen. The story with the Tzemach Tzedek is that after the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic, the Alter Rebbe would appear to him and he would ask him questions in Torah, and Chassidus, and Halacha, and other things. And the Alter Rebbe would answer him. In fact, the Alter Rebbe gave him an itinerary where he should go, where he should visit, in which places he should be. This is going on for a while. One day, he didn't see the Alter Rebbe anymore. And then he did whatever he knew to do, and he still couldn't see the Alter Rebbe. Very bothered by it. That a few days went by, and for some reason or other, the Alter Rebbe doesn't appear to him anymore. And one morning, he was going to daven. He had the talus over his shoulders, started preparing. Then he went getting ready to daven. Somebody walks over to him. It was a butcher, and he said that today is a market day. People are coming from all over to buy in our market. I need a little loan. I want to buy a calf so I can sell it and make some profits. Could you give me a loan? Obviously, Tzemach Tzedek had money that he used to lend people money. So Tzemach Tzedek, sure, come to me right after davening and I'll give it to you. Person walked away. Then Tzemach Tzedek said to himself, wait a second. He said he needs it because of the marketplace. It's a market day. So then he probably needs it early in the day, not later in the day. So he took off his talus, he went home, he got the money, went to find this butcher and gave him the money that he should be able to start his day right away with the business. Went back to shul, walked over to the sink to wash his hands, and right there the Alter Rebbe appeared. The Rebbe tells a story how we see the tremendous mitzvah. This is not tzedakah, this is a loan. How amazing the mitzvah of giving the milas chasadim, a loan to another Jew is. That the Alter Rebbe did not appear. He did everything he knew to do and he still didn't appear. And then eventually Alter Rebbe appeared. Why? In the merit of the fact that he gave this loan. One more thing I want to talk about is, of course, the Tzemach Tzedek was involved, like every Rebbe, in teaching Hasidus, and also all the Rebbes of Chabad were involved in a lot of community issues. But in those days, a lot of the things that were done were not known publicly. So, for example, one of the things which is considered one of the main or major primary activities of Tzedek was the Kantonistim. There was a decree that the Tsar decreed that in order, this was really aimed at Jews, and the aim was to convert little Jewish children. But he camouflaged it by saying that in order to have a good army, you have to have soldiers that are trained from a very young age. So therefore, every family has to give one of their children to join the army when they're 7 or 8 years old. Of course, Jewish children go to an army of the Tsar means they'll grow up like non-Jews. So the Jewish kids, the parents didn't want to, but the soldiers came, they took kids by force. Unfortunately, there were secular Jews that were helping the government, and they kidnapped children. So I'm not finished yet. I'm finishing about it. Yeah? Okay. You can go to the back, or you can come here. Yeah. Sorry. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So unfortunately, there were Jews who helped kidnap children. Because they were Jews, nobody suspected them, and they kidnapped children. Unfortunately, went to the army, and I guess it's the Russian word for it. They were called Kantonisti. So the Tzemach Tzedek had a group of Chassidim that they were called the Society of Tchias HaMesim, which means they went and they kidnapped the children from the camps, brought them back home to their parents, and they saved a lot of these children. And as a result of that, in other words, they tried to force the kids to eat treif, to work on Shabbos, to accept Christianity. And most of the children actually had Mesiras Nefesh. They suffered, even though they were little children, but they were very strong in their belief. I don't know if you know this, there's actually somebody in this building, in the school, that she is a descendant of one of those Cantonists.
What?
Her great-grandfather was one of the Cantonists that Tzemach Tzedek saved. Yep. So this is the work that he did. Of course, we don't know very little about the details because this was clearly going against the Tsar, and anybody who was caught would have been death penalty for sure. And Tzemach Tzedek had a huge operation of Chassidim all over doing this, taking children, bringing them back to their parents, and doing whatever they can to prevent them from being taken away. That was his main avodah. And then in terms of Chassidus, the Maimer we're learning actually, that we learned until now, this is from the Tzemach Tzedek, the one that we learned about mitzvahs, vidu, and tshuva. Yeah, I guess this is basically it. So I think this is the last class I'm giving before Rosh Hashana. So I want to wish everybody to see what's on the table. Shana Teva Masuka, and hopefully see you by the mail Rosh Hashana night.
Mm.
Okay.